The views and opinions in this program are not those of CISA 7 or Spectrum.
Agenda, which will include discussion and taking action as deemed necessary on redesign 2020, discussion of potential considerations including boundary changes, school consolidations, and facility repurposing.
Second. Maloney?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Vanden Heuvel?
Aye.
Sitnikow?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
McCoy? Aye. Shelton?
Aye. Carried 7-0. So I'm not sure who's starting. I'll turn it over to whoever's starting the next conversation.
Thank you. Good morning. We have the documents that you requested last evening, including the elementary feeder school patterns. We've also provided for you the document that shows all of our schools and the different program opportunities within the schools, as well as the documents focused in on enrollment history. And the other piece that you have before you are the notes from the July 11th, 2019 meeting that Casey and Janelle facilitated as well, so that you can see all the conversations that went on as well. I think one of the pieces, as I was thinking about this last night, is the recognition that these conversations are brought forward to the Board of Education by administration, with the recognition that as we look forward, it's very important to really keep an eye on where our enrollments are moving, what kind of challenges the district is facing and has been facing. And as I reflected back on my drive home last night, thinking about the fact that the district has always been in a negative balance deficit each year with the school financing. And I know, Laura, you brought that important point up. And we've never had to do a layoff. We've never had to cut positions. We've always been able to balance the budget and move it forward. And that is a result of being strategic and thinking forward when you look and plan for the future. So the Board of Education up to this point has really asked for these kinds of pieces of information to keep on top of them, with the recognition that we have a responsibility, children first, and I recognizing that we want to have the best programming for children, and the more efficient our schools are run, the more resource we can provide our children in our schools. In addition to that, the better resources we can provide our teachers. So this conversation is important for those reasons. It's for children and it's for the staff to deliver the best high quality programming we can. So it's not to disrupt or harm people sitting in schools now, but the recognition that we want the very best and have a responsibility to do that for our students and our staff and our community. So that's just laying those thoughts on as I was driving home, and the important recognition that even though we've been in different places and spaces in budgetary constraints, we see that in 2 years, if we don't do something, you know, somebody said last night, well, what's the driver? Well, one of the important drivers behind this is greater efficiencies result in greater resources for children, and that's what we're about. So thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to do a recap from what we talked about yesterday. I'm wondering who would like to lead that discussion, just to bring us up to speed. Last night seemed really far away. Want to make sure we're still at level set. Who wants to start?
I'll start.
for at least part of it, the chart about the why, the what and the how, I thought was a good exercise to kind of zero in on some of our priorities. And I probably should dig that out of my bag, actually, because that is a guiding, oh, thank you, yeah, and as a guiding kind of document for our work here. So I appreciate that. I'm gonna get it.
The big board is right behind us as well, and I'd like to have that put up. Janelle's going to take care of that.
I think looking at our capacities in our schools and seeing which schools are under capacity, by how much, helps us to have the foundation from which to look at efficiencies that would make sense in our district.
I had taken some notes, and this is something I remember being discussed last night, and I'm hoping we can definitely touch on today and dive into, is talking about understanding that we do have mobility, but also understanding that we need to figure out why. And we need to think about that as well.
Kids at the center.
Yep, kids at the center. Kids at the center. What else?
For me, it always circles back to how we fund schools. And if we had endless resources, we could do everything we dream about and would like to do. But that will never be our reality. So we have to go back to that always, and how do we use those resources?
Yes, go ahead. Yep.
And not to be forgotten or lost in the conversation from last night or today, just to reiterate that it's important that we find the voice of our community in these discussions and decisions.
So I thought about that last night. You guys have in your guiding change document the word stakeholders. I'd like to define that today. What does that mean to you? What does it mean for the district, right? When we say stakeholders, it's not just one group of individuals. So because we're going to put you guys into groups, otherwise we'll never get done if we do it individually. So it'll be the same process we use in July. But one of the things that I'd like for you guys to do in your groups is to define stakeholders. What does that mean? Who are our customers? And I know that in K-12, that's very hard for us to say that our students are our customers, but I'd like for us to define what stakeholder groups, what does that include? Who is your constituent? The other thing is we talked, Michelle went over, I think, all the phases that we went through. Anybody remember that discussion or presentation in terms of how many times we've shared data around enrollment, around mobility, around vouchers? Do you guys remember that discussion? Yeah. What did we talk about? I'm just level setting. Want to make sure we're all on the same page before I break you out into groups. Yes, ma'am.
Took notes on that. I don't know if this is what you're looking for, but how uncanny Mike's projections are, and that they seem to be real data to work with.
We also talked to you about the complexities of tracking the data, though, moving forward with vouchers, open enrollment, and students, with vouchers and open enrollment.
And that the rules have changed in such a way that Mike, with an outstanding track record prediction, there's so many variables that whoever the predictor is, there will be more variance now because of the choice. You could voucher out, you could choice out, but I guess I also don't, when we're thinking about a projection that has the enrollment declining a little bit, I don't want to be stuck in a deficit model that doesn't include people coming back from out of the district too. I mean, you can't predict exact numbers, nor can you predict exact numbers of people who will voucher out, but it's, you know, what I would like to see is the kind of program that would pull people back in who left, or cause voluntary movement if possible from some of the places that are a little too crowded.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a great discussion point for you when you're in your groups, because one of the things you have to understand is why are people leaving? And what will attract them, bring them back, right? Because if you don't have the programming and if you don't have the infrastructure and they can get it somewhere else, that's where they're going to go. But you got to understand the why behind it, just like you have to understand the why and why we need to make changes. Anything else? Eric, I haven't heard from you. I just want to make sure we're good.
I just want to add to what you just said. I think too, we have to understand also why people are moving within our district.
Yeah, for sure.
Because they're still here, but
For
there's
sure.
some reason why they've chosen to be in a different school than where their attendance is.
Absolutely.
I just want to say thank you for pointing that out, because we know that that's something that we have to do a better job of. So thank you for also just acknowledging that.
Hi, Eric.
I think the takeaway that I had from last night regarding, hearing that we're a declining enrollment district, but that it really applies to all over, right? Every school or side of town or high school, middle school, elementary, it's pretty broad across the board. And I think that can be seen as an opportunity, but it's something that we can take an entire district view of. I think often, my perception, I think going in was that the west side is landlocked and it's declining over there, and the east side is exploding and all of our schools are full over there. And it just, that isn't necessarily the case. Although part of that is true, we are landlocked, there is more growth opportunities on the east side, but overall, according to Mike's projections, everyone's going down, some more at a drastic rate than others. But I think to look at that today from a lens of opportunity and what's best for all students, instead of it's easy to look at that as a negative, less resources and some difficult conversations, but it's also an opportunity to be able to do some new and exciting things.
Yeah, thank you for that. One of the things, thanks for your comments, just reminded me about anecdotal data, right? Because people are in school saying it's overcrowded, it's this, it's that, oh my gosh. But we have concrete data that may be differ from that. So that's the data we should be using to make decisions.
Just to follow up on your comment, Eric, I just want you to make aware that even though we're showing that we have extra capacity and we're seeing that also on the east side, we have to keep in mind that we've added a lot of capacity through the referendum on our east side also. So if we wouldn't have added that through the last referendum, we would actually be over capacity on the east side. Just keep that in mind.
Not to be lost or forgotten, there are people that live in our boundaries and choice to other school districts because they have had experiences that sometimes with customer service that are not favorable, and they're choosing to leave. And I think I'm hopeful that that's also going to be a part of this discussion.
Yeah, I just want to address that a little bit, because I think we have survey data, right, from 2019, I believe, around what we want to do. I think that face sheet was shared with you yesterday. I'd like for you to bring that up when you're in your groups. Customer service, customer experience is always an issue, and in order for you to make improvements in that regard, you have to, again, I will say, understand the why. So if you're not doing exit surveys of students and families that are leaving, you're not going to fix that issue, right? To understand what are we not providing, and I think for you to bring that up, Rhonda, I would like for you to really think through what you could do to help the district, or your team help the district get to a customer experience that you would want to see.
I'm not disputing that, because I maybe have heard that too, but I also seem to recall somewhere, I don't know if Lori or somebody remembers this, but somewhere a majority, I believe, of people who open enroll out of our district have never been in Green Bay Public Schools. So they haven't had a chance to have a customer service experience. They've left before they've even come to kindergarten. So.
And that number is, what was 60-some%? Yeah, over 60%. And I think we've made attempts to try to figure out, the reason that population is leaving, but it's very difficult when they haven't had any relationship with us to have them want to give us input. So I know that's been worked on, but it's just difficult to find that, or to collect that data.
You want to go first, Michelle? Yeah, and I think I'm curious. I don't have the answer, but I'm curious because I know data is important. Yeah. Survey data is important. We have to have good data to help us make decisions. I also think, and I'm curious to dig more into how we ensure that we don't just reduce people's experiences to data, right? Because we're human beings and we're very complex and communities are very complex. And while data is important and it has to be a main driver of decision making, we also too have to remember, right? I mean, maybe we can talk about this today and how we ensure that that is central, but it's not the only lever that we pull when we make decisions. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Can I quick ask you to clarify when you're talking about data, what kinds of data are you talking about?
Well, we were talking about the projections, the enrollment projections, and we were talking about survey data. So that was kind of the initial two that came to mind for me.
Because I think it's important to also remember we have a lot of anecdotal data, I think, through our open enrollment work too. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I was talking about
I just wanted to make sure what you're
what's
talking
in front
about.
of us.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, Christina, I think those are really good points. I think in order for you to understand why people are leaving or why people are coming, it's important to have that baseline to say, gosh, we could be doing something really, really effective and well. When people walk through your hallways, what are the artifacts that they see from a customer experience, right? Do they see friendliness? Do you roll out the red carpet? Do you see artifacts in terms of awards for customer service and making sure that the whole child is taken care of? I think understanding that there's some anecdotal information that we can garner, like teacher would having conversations with parents, that's one set. But also to get concrete data, right? What are our people really, really saying? I think that's one of the components in addition to looking at mobility, other data, enrollment, projections, funding, budget, all of that. That all plays into how we make that decision because you can't look at everything in isolation. We have to look at everything as a whole. And I speak about data a lot because I think that's really important. Having anecdotal information is great, but is it true? Yeah.
And I agree with you, and I'm not talking about anecdotal data. I'm just saying that I think data is great, but it's still limited. Right? There are limitations to the data we have. I think that helps us to then think what else we need to gather, right? But I also think we know, especially from our most marginalized communities, right, that we historically overlook them as a society, and that it is difficult to gather data around school communities and how they become part of leadership and decision making and how they have felt historically over time. So yes to all of that. That's kind of more what I was thinking, but thank you for that.
Yeah, I think, sorry. No, that's okay. And I think when you get into your groups, Christine, I would love to get the team's feedback on how we fix that. How do we fix that? What can we do differently? Because I agree with you. We could do 1 million surveys and we can have 1 million points of data. But if we have a marginalized group of individuals that we're just not touching, what can we do differently? Because that plays into equity, right, and disproportionality across all programs.
Yes, I actually looked into that a little bit deeper last night, and it's definitely something that we need to have on our radar screen. And yes, the survey did say this isn't a scientific sample because it wasn't, but I expected there to be differences between some schools as to how many would respond and how many wouldn't. But we had schools over 500 students in it that had one of them represented 3% of the respondents, one of them 0.5%. And then we had a school of somewhere in the 300s represented 7%. So it wasn't a small participation gap. It was, in that survey, it was large and it needs to be considered. And we don't know how it might have been different, but we need to think about when we look at that survey, there was definitely a missing participation, and it was, our CEP schools participated at a lower rate for their size than did the others. So that's relevant, although there's no, so that means it's, whatever we're doing, we have to make sure that we're reaching out the right ways and focused.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think that goes to Christina's point, right? Like, what can we do differently for that population? Want to make sure that you are having that discussion in your groups. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up to this conversation, I think it's really important to recognize that the Board of Education gave us the go to survey families that leave. Very few participants in that and not a lot of really good data. But we're going to bring that forward, and that was our plan next month. The other piece of that is the fact that we are just in the process of the parent survey for our families within our schools. And we know, and I've been meeting with principals, I've had conversations how important it is to get our families to complete that data so that they may not do a survey that comes to the mail and they might not even see that as their school, but affording them that voice, because we know year after year the board has asked for that information and we want to be able to provide it. So I've personally addressed the principals. I know that some schools have actually done significant outreach and done things during family gatherings that they had people complete the survey while they were there. So we're working on that right now, and then that could help to inform so that if the school feels marginalized, they would have the resources. I also think that the piece around the efforts with the community school effort that we have going on at How Community School is going to be a real game changer and transformational, and that's just beginning that process. But it is the collective efforts of all to bring in. The other piece that the board also had given us direction for, and this is around the customer service piece. And we have been out awarding extra mile awards and customer service awards and making that very public on social media and really heralding those in our schools that are really uplifting and making sure going above and beyond to support families coming in. And that has been a really successful effort, and that will take a little bit of time to root, but I truly believe that has been taken very seriously. We went through a lot of training. We hope to provide more training in the summer. And it's often just a reminder of recognizing that it's the Maya Angelou quote, "It's not what you said, it's how you made me feel." And that's really what we're looking for. So,
Thanks, Michelle. Lori, could you go back to slide, I think it's 2. We're still, yep, go back, one more. We're still good? Desired outcomes from the retreat. The board will gain a shared understanding of the district's current and future enrollment. Did you get that? We're good on that?
Yes.
Affirm the guiding change document. Did we do that yesterday? Great. Identify potential solutions the Board of Education wishes to explore further. We will do that today. Agree to the timeline and methodology for public participation for exploration. We're going to do that today.
I have one question. Does the first bullet point assume that we are going to treat these numbers as actuals for the next 10 years? Because, well, I think they by design do not include anything we would do to going forward try to pull people back in or new people in from other places. And I think that's there's some risk to that, but I think it's relevant. And part of my decision would be, based on, can we get people to move thereby changing these numbers, or can we put in an attractor that would bring people back in?
Well, that depends on the programming, what transformation work you're going to do, right? What your programming looks like. What is your methodology for attracting those people back? Would depend on what are you offering from a district level. And I would say also, I really want to hear from your solution in terms of, do we take those numbers as Bible, or what do you want to add a 5 to 10% on top of that? What is it? What is your recommendation?
I guess I don't know till we talk. I guess I know enough to say that I don't take I don't take these as I guess I do take these as best available with current methodology, but I would stop short of taking them as biblical because we can and will do things that would change them. So I would consider it the best available current projection if we don't change things.
That is correct.
Okay.
Baseline, this is where we're at. We know we're gonna do things differently, that will increase, right? That's what you're saying, that's what I agree to. Everybody else agree with that? Baseline?
And well, I would say that also, not only are we gonna do things differently, but there's a whole list of things that we have no control over.
That's right.
That also affects, so I
Well,
agree with Andrew that this is
Yep.
a starting point, but
Yep.
it's not to be taken as, we used to be able to say, oh, there, this many kids will be in this school. We can't do that anymore.
Yes, ma'am.
Mike, I just wanted to thank you for the historical data. This is really great. This is really helpful for me, since I've only been on the board for a year and a half. Also, I thought you weren't gonna be here today. Okay, I was like, am I losing it? Oh, okay, all right, that's all. Well, I hope you make it.
We're gonna get him out of here really quickly. So, yes, ma'am.
So I would hesitate to use the word Bible for various reasons, but I would also say that, and I mentioned this yesterday, I just want to make it clear for myself personally, not speaking for anyone else, that we're discussing ideas today. We're not committing because I cannot commit to anything in my position without bringing the public with me in this. And at 9:43 in the morning, the public really cannot be here. So just wanted to say that clearly.
I just want to address that. Heard you yesterday, hear you again today. I will reiterate, we are generating ideas. That is the first step. You have what you had yesterday in terms of level setting. We're recapping now. We're going to generate some ideas. You're going to talk about it, flesh some of them out, definitely take it to the community. You cannot do this work without community input. That's a given. But I want to make sure we're all clear that that's what we're agreeing to. Everybody at this table, because I don't want to have to answer that question again. We're all good?
And I would say that I had that question posed quite a bit, at least 50 times since July. So I would definitely want to make sure that it's clear from where I'm coming from. So I'm on record with that. Thank you.
So for clarification, at the end of today, when administration is going out gathering information, will we be clear on which things the board wants us to collect information on? So that will be, the board will make that decision. Okay, thank you.
Great. Are we ready? Can you just count by, I'm going to add Michelle and Lori and Vicky and John and Mr. New Finance Guy? Mr. New Finance Guy? Pete. Okay. New Finance Guy? Yeah. So we're going to do two groups of 6. So if you could just count out by twos, I guess. 1, 2. Rhonda, you want to start?
1, 2, 1.
2.
1, 2, 1.
2.
1. Vicky?
2. 1, 2.
Perfect. Group 1 here, group 2 here. Before we get up, just want to say, what time is lunch? I'm not hungry, I was just asking. Yep.
Lori, can you just put it on the mic?
Okay, so for videotaping purposes then, what I'm gonna do is when we're in the small group sessions, I'm gonna pause the tape because nobody's microphone, so then it's just people, all they would see is people talking in corners with no sound. And then the idea is that when we come back as a large group, is then I would put the recording back on because then people will be microphoned again so people can then hear what you determined in your small groups. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes.
Lunch is being delivered at 11, and then Lindley needs to set it up. Thank you.
Just as a clarification for administration, our role is to answer questions.
Thank you, Michelle.
Okay, you see that beautiful map behind you?
It's pretty nice.
It's gorgeous, isn't it? So please use that in your groups. Look at boundaries, look at where schools are, look at the feeder patterns. You're gonna have to look at everything, everything. I'd like to give you until 11:45 to kind of get the initial bumps, get started, and then we'll break for lunch, and then we'll come back. I don't want to take an hour for lunch. If we could do 30 minutes and then get right back into it.
10:45 to 11:45.
11:45.
The lunch is at 11.
But
No,
it
it's-
takes time to set up.
45 minutes?
Well, it's being delivered so that we have an option of what time makes sense to eat.
Don't worry, Andrew, we'll get you fed.
Because I don't think it's hot,
Okay.
so
Okay.
it'll wait for us. No, I'm just saying it'll wait for us. It won't get
Yeah,
cold.
something that delineates the borders. I'm not saying take a marker to the thing, but a separate map with the board, I mean, I don't have the borders.
Yeah, we have that map. It's,
I'll grab the.
when we pull out.
Great,
that's the whole district attendance boundaries. That'll be helpful.
great. Group 1 over here, group 2 over here.
Ready to come back? Lori, did you restart? Okay. All right, well, we've had a lot of conversation in the entering, hour and a half or so. And, I'll turn it back to you, Casey, to lead us in discussion about what our 2 small groups talked about.
Thank you very much, Brenda. What I would like to do is start with group 2, have that team present on their ideas, what they went through and some of the discussions that they've had, and they went down a lot of rabbit holes, which is good, because you have a really good discussion base then. And then I'd like for them to present on their top 3 to 4 ideas that they're throwing around for NEW and JDOL, and then walk us through what the timeline would look like for each of them in terms and cost, and does that require a referendum? Then I'm going to turn it over to group 1 and talk about Keller, same process. What I'd like for you to, when you're listening to the groups present, think about the synergy that you have, because I've heard conversations on both ends. I know where the connection points are, and I'm hoping that when they're presenting that they'll be clear to you as well. Once we're done with that, I'm going to break you back out into groups to kind of flesh out some of the questions that you're going to get from other team members. I still want to define stakeholders. That's really, really important. We have to do that. I'm hoping that in your presentations, you'll also talk about the beautiful map and some boundary ramifications and transportation stuff that you thought through, in addition to what data or what components you will need as the next step in terms of really fleshing out those ideas and options. Remember our agreements and expectations. Can you turn it to slide 2 again for me, please? Slide 3, identify potential solutions the Board of Education wishes to explore further. You've done some brainstorming. What do you need next? To flesh it out even more, and then have a solid, like, here are the top 3 things we want to take to the community to have some listening sessions, some surveys, get their feedback, et cetera, and what that looks like from a timeline perspective as well. Are we good? And that'll take us till probably 3:30. 3? 2? Oh, 2, sorry. I thought it was 4. But good, 2. That's fine. It'll take us until 2. And we only have, so much time to be able to get, that's a lot of work to get done in the next couple of hours, so I want to get started right away. We ready? Okay. Group 1.
All right, so we have a lot of notes. I need to get to the last page. All right, we had one solution for John Dewey Academy, and that is to stay in the current site at Cherry Street and become and have the whole building. So that purchase price is $2.6 million. We save $350,000 a year rent. The building would be ready by 2021, and there would be no referendum required. Then we had a number of options that we talked about for NEW School of Innovation. One is to move it to Keller. There's room there for we did a lot of looking at the long-term enrollment goals of both of the schools. And so Keller would be able to accommodate the long-term enrollment of NEW. And we talked a little bit about if we do that, what happens. We talked about if we moved Keller students, it would be great to be able to move all of them to one place instead of splitting them into different attendance boundaries. We talked about also moving Keller to Kennedy becoming a K-8 school. There's a huge footprint there that we could go to referendum for and add the space that would be needed for a K-8 school. And so that part of it would be a referendum. Somebody had the ambition of November 2020. That would be Casey. We put two big question marks because the rest of the group felt that was very ambitious. Okay, so putting the NEW students into Keller would be some remodeling. It would not require a referendum. We talked about bringing NEW here and explore moving departments out of here into existing spaces, primarily Franklin and West, or potentially even Keller. And then, or we would look at an existing open building to purchase and remodel. We didn't put a dollar sign on that, but that's a lot of dollars and would require facilities referendum. That would not be ready by 2021, nor would these last three would not be 2021 solutions because of the referendum and then the building remodeling process. And then the last one would a building on the technical college campus. They have land. That would be a possibility. But again, the same issues over here with that option. So, and then we talked a lot about dominoes with many of these, but I'll keep it simple to that.
Questions for the team? No questions for the team? Yeah. Okay. These are.
When you discussed NEW moving to Keller, was there any discussion about services that the building leadership has identified as, it's positive having it and support the central services for library, for parks, for social services, transportation? I know there was a mention during a public meeting about that. They appreciated having those central services in that location and proximity to the school. Was there ever a discussion about that from the team?
I'm not quite sure what you're talking about.
Okay, I can. No.
Oh, you got an answer, Andrew?
You do? Okay, great. Okay.
So you're talking about advantages of NEW and Dewey continuing to share?
No.
Oh.
I'll be more clear. So just so everyone understands. So there was a mention during the presentation that JDAL and NEW had not that long ago, where the principal NEW talked about how much they appreciate the support of having central services in proximity to the school. Right. He called it central services.
But everyone else didn't understand.
Right.
We talked a lot about, we did not address that specifically, but talked a lot about the benefit of being that close to NWTC, because they already, each grade level at NEW goes to NWTC at least once a week. And to have that proximity to NWTC would be a benefit. But we didn't address the other because that, yeah, go ahead.
But again, just noting it's, the quality of life component of that as well is important. Yep. Just want to make sure.
Great. Any other questions?
I want to make sure that's captured somewhere, so if this option goes out, we make sure that that's part of the discussion.
It's in our notes over.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's, I don't want to lose it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Question about district office building, NEW coming here. That would probably mean DOB going someplace else, I would assume. Any discussion about the cost of moving all, would we be able to keep our technology and things here? Would that all?
Yeah, we talked about that. It would be a
Because we
partial inhabitation of DOB. We would have to keep technology just because of the prohibitive cost to transfer it.
Okay.
And then we talked about if DOB having departments leave this building, potential spaces at Keller, West, and Franklin. were the
Okay,
three
that's
that-
different than, because we had the conversation about selling DOB and moving all of it out, and then we talked about, are we really gonna get, what value would we really
Right.
get for the building, and then the cost of moving the technology, and so that got a little bit dicey, but this situation is different, because we would keep the building and just repurpose it.
Right,
Okay.
yeah. And we talked about the same issues with selling. We had the same conversation.
He gave us a reality check on that one, the value.
The value of the building, yeah.
What is it? Yeah, can you
Oh, no, I don't know that
share?
it's,
I'm just curious what you just said.
that's fine. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Give him a microphone. He needs a microphone.
Oh, Eric's coming with the microphone.
It's high level, but at least they know. Yeah. At least somebody looked at it.
Mike had done some basic inquiry, although this is not an official appraisal. The value of the property is about 13.5 million. It's estimated that on the market now it would bring between 2 and 4 million, because the logical purchaser would likely develop it into housing and would have to spend about 20 million to bring it into speed for that type of condo development, or up to speed. So its value really isn't worth what it would be appraised at.
But there was discussion in our group that it might have been worth $1. So we can agree that it's more than $1. It's a couple million. Okay.
But the other, to move our technology out of this building was $2 or $3 million, dollars. Don't ask me why, because I don't know technology, but
Okay, well,
that was the estimate. So it would be $1, we'd be back to $1.
Not if you found a way to make almost the entire building available, except
Right,
maintaining the equivalent of like almost an easement of
right.
your fiber stuff, so. But
Josh had a reason as to why leaving the technology. Can you come up more?
Yeah, come up to the microphone, please.
Go ahead.
I just know when we originally talked about it, the transitioning was expensive and difficult to do. One of the things we did talk about with Josh was the fact that eventually the current technology and the current opportunity will shift and change with new innovation and new technology. So thinking forward, if the goal of the board would be to sell this for $1, or whatever you want to do with it, and move us, the whole district out of here, that could be something put on the radar, and he could probably give you a timeline and back it out as to when, because the life of our current technology system is gonna change.
Right.
It'll have to be redone, so that was kind of our discussion.
Can I just ask a question?
Go ahead.
I just want to ask a question here. Out of these one, two, three, four, 5, total of 6, any heartburn around any of these ideas?
Can I get up?
Yep.
Like, look at them?
I have one. If there is a move of Keller and then presumably something else would go in there, there certainly could be an issue around the transfer of neighborhood school students, which wouldn't occur if there was a different way to fully utilize that building, which is, and a couple things have been mentioned, and you probably have a couple things in your group, but ultimately for me, that's where it comes down to the importance of the public input, because the idea that, the magic idea that makes it work and keeps it a neighborhood school may exist or may not, or I just don't know, because we haven't heard from people yet. So
So what I would maybe say is heartburn issues over here we'll talk about in our presentation in a second.
You're gonna create heartburn, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I've got
Okay,
heartburn.
good.
Who doesn't have heartburn after lunch? Anyways, I would say for me, and just an initial reaction is the purchasing of any additional buildings or the building of any additional buildings gives me significant pause, because we have already so many buildings that are underutilized. And I can't imagine that the public's going to be excited to spend more money on new buildings when we have existing buildings that are already paid for.
And we talked about that. We just wanted to generate.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. I just wanted to.
We've got ideas that we don't love on our list.
Right.
I'm not criticizing anybody. You asked me what was giving me pause, and that was my pause.
I'm just letting you know I have the same exact heartburn. Matching heartburns.
And just to reiterate again, I believe from what I continue to hear from NEW is that they believe that the ability for students to get out of the building, take a walk, go to the park, go to the library, it's definitely it's value for their program.
All right, Christina and I are going to do this one together. So first option was around how do we get more kids to go to Keller. We talked about the interesting location of kind of on two sides of the school is another school district. So if we could put something there, whether it be a magnet or a school within a school, a lot of conversation around Montessori, knowing that we've got 3 daycare Montessoris in our community. There's a big need, and if we were able to slowly build, very similar to Da Vinci, we talked about Da Vinci as how that started within Langlade, slowly grew, got more support, and eventually became its own building. And so if we were able to do something similar with Keller, whether it be Montessori or something else, we talked extensively about NEW and did not like the idea of going there. I gave the specific example when I took a tour of the NEW and JDOL. I probably knew 25 kids personally from the Boys and Girls Club, and personally had individual conversations, kids that I knew very well, and they go to either Oneida Street or University. So I know in my heart of hearts that a lot of kids who attend that school live in those neighborhoods. And it didn't feel right to me to take a program that is so amazing and wonderful and making a difference in their lives. And yes, it is closer to NWTC, but it's not closer to our customers. So not super crazy about that, and would have to have more information. So I'm not saying no, not never, but major heartburn. Yeah. So the Montessori idea, again, we felt like there's a lot of interest in our community. And if we started on a small scale, maybe we offer a kindergarten Montessori and we go to those 3 daycares and we advertise it and we see how many kids sign up. And if 20 kids sign up, we can have one section of a Montessori kindergarten. And if 50 kids sign up, now we've hopefully have 3 sections of a Montessori kindergarten, and then can use that to grow that school within a school. If at some point that becomes a K-5 Montessori building, and now rather than like JDOL move them out, turn that into a neighborhood magnet Montessori school. So all the kids who live within the current Keller attendance area would now go to a Montessori school, very much like King is a STEM school. So we do that around our district. So we thought that I was going to let you go next. Oh, sure. Yeah. So school within a school. Then we kind of brought up JDOL. And we know that we have referendum dollars that are set aside for a JDOL. One of the things we did talk about with JDOL is we believe in that program. Wherever it goes next, we want it to live. We don't want JDOL to be bouncing around. It was here and now it's here, and then we move it someplace else. Wherever it goes next, they have to have some ownership. So the potential of JDOL to be that school within the school was something that we also considered. So a lot of different options from a magnet perspective, but this $2.25 million that was from the last referendum could be used to modify Keller. One of the concerns that we had, or heartburns with that idea, is that JDOL is a 612 building. So if I'm a parent with a kindergarten student at Keller, am I really excited that there are high schoolers going to? So we don't know that for sure, but it was kind of gave us pause around JDOL. Is that good? Sure.
Okay. Hello, is it working? Okay. I'll do this next one and then I'll jump. So the other option for Keller was for Keller to head to Kennedy. We had a really long conversation about that. We talked a lot about class sizes at Kennedy. We talked a lot about the boundaries there. Was there anything else with Keller to Kennedy? I feel like, no, I can't.
The only things as we looked at the boundaries, there's a few students who right now go to Keller from a boundary perspective who actually live south of, is that Shawano, who might actually be closer. So, if you were to do this option, maybe you could give parents the option to say, hey, if you're at Keller and Keller is being something else, you could go to Kennedy, or some parents live close to Chapel and you could give them the choice based, if you live on the northern side of the Keller elementary area, maybe you'd rather go to Chapel, IB. But this solution then didn't, like, what's going to happen to Keller, because we know we don't want to shutter a school. We don't want to just leave it. So it would have to become something else. And we've brainstormed several different ideas, didn't get into these a ton. It was just from the group saying we do not want it to just be empty. So it's got to be something else if we go with this option.
Yeah, and some of those things that we talked about, if whether the students at Keller stay there or Keller becomes entirely, we talked about DOB moving there, maybe professional learning moving out there. We also talked a lot about Keller becoming a community school and ways that we can use that space to provide wraparound services. So we talked about like COMSA and healthcare, dental care, eye care, that can those spaces maybe even be rented out by service providers. That would also help us recover some of the cost lost from the space. We also, another thing that sort of resonated with the group was that there's sort of a void of service in that neighborhood in the community, and that could really demonstrate like a deep investment in that area of the city. And then the last thing was sort of a bigger idea, was recognizing that there has been a lot of talk and support around a K-8 on the west side. So we talked about Franklin maybe becoming a K-8, that's kind of then their own feeder for IB. That would require boundary changes, of course. But we liked that idea. That also included a conversation about the NEW school maybe going to Lincoln. There were some different pieces there. So I think within the K-8 Franklin, there's many moving parts, but we were interested in exploring that. And also it aligned with the numbers at Franklin as well, the space.
One of the pieces of information that I think Lori had for us is that in the Lincoln neighborhood, something like 46% of the kids who should go to Lincoln go someplace else. So already people who live in that neighborhood, almost half of them are choosing a different option, probably a variety of different reasons, but that was a piece of information that we thought, okay, if there was a K-8 here in IB, Lincoln would make sense to be able to go to that school, and then Lincoln could fit our need for NEW, still maintaining more of a downtown presence. Yeah, we just talked about NEW, I guess, going to Lincoln. Yeah, yeah. So the idea. Yeah, it was charter numbers that we felt like Lincoln could be a better option for JADL. Or excuse me, now I'm confused. You're confusing me for NEW school because again, that location is important to us, that they're in that downtown corridor for NEW.
Love. Those are great ideas. What do you guys think? Group 2?
Well, I think the K-8 we explored, but from a different location. But I think that was a message that was clear in the survey, that was a very popular option for people.
Yeah, and again, I think the thing that intrigued me the most with the K with Franklin is we've been talking a lot about the IB program and needing to grow that. And if we can have that be its own feeder, right, then you're going to sort of grow within and they'll stick within and then maybe be more likely to go to West.
So that would give us a second elementary IB program that we would have to.
Right, and I think because it's then connected to IB and K-8, which we know people like, hopefully that will increase enrollment there.
Okay.
One of the things we also talked about from a K-8 perspective was that, we've talked about, our one K-8 is way out on the far east side with Red Smith. We've got a K-8 that, Aldo. We've talked about the potential of maybe a K-8 in Alloway at some point, but investing in our inner city to say, hey, K-8s are popular, and instead of putting them around the outside, to put one in our urban center, really felt like as we were looking at that map, like, look where all these K-8s are on the outside of the circle and nothing on the inside. So that was another consideration that came up in our group.
Sorry. Go ahead.
One thing about, it seems like if there is interest in Kennedy not being in Keller not being a neighborhood elementary school, that Kennedy comes up a lot as a next location. I think we need to make sure, I'm assuming that the projection, the capacity numbers here are based on traditional staffing. So Kennedy has two center-based special needs programs there, which by most accounts I've heard is really an asset and works well there. So I think we just need to, when I look at the fact that Kennedy might have, between 120, 170 open spots, if it was only traditionally staffed classrooms, I don't see it as having, like, if you only looked at the capacity number, you might look at, you might say, ooh, hey, are we almost getting close enough to completely combine them in existing space? And I think the answer is a solid no with the center-based programs there. And probably no anyways, but it's a solid no with the center-based, so.
So could you just say that last sentence again?
Yeah, so because of where on paper, if the buildings just had traditional programming in them, it would look like Kennedy could almost incorporate all of Keller. It in fact can't even it's not even close because of the center-based programming, and it would still probably be a little short even without it, so.
Sure.
Even if we move the center base.
Yes, yeah, so then that's where we started kind of going down the, what you could do though is Kennedy could get bigger if you expanded it, and you wouldn't be expanding it only to accommodate moving kids from one school to this, but maybe you make that one the K-8.
Yeah, so two things on that one. First, we said that this option, and I guess really these two kind of together were our least favorites. You know, we just put them on the list because we discussed them. And it really, well, no, I guess that one's separate, so that would include.
It's not, we didn't necessarily say that it was like an easy, like pick up and move. I think this was also within the conversation, right, of can some of the students from Keller, could they go to Chapel? Is there some ways that you could sort of look at the boundaries? That was part of it.
If Franklin becomes the K-8.
Right, yep, thank you. Michelle, did you have something?
Could you talk a little bit more about, I'm very intrigued by the Montessori piece at Keller. And so the vision is, I'm thinking about if we take this out to the public and have the conversation, do you anticipate then that eventually the whole school is Montessori? But you could potentially also, the footprint is big enough that you could have the wraparound, so you could do.
Yeah. We thought it was like a really good incubator space.
Okay.
Because this building space is there, so it's a low risk.
Yeah.
Right? And you could also maybe pull in from people from Howard Swamico and open enrolling in if there's something really like that's really community driven. So we also talked about wanting to do some research about numbers of what some other ideas could be if it's not Montessori, if there's another thing. But we thought absolutely it could start really small and we could sort of grow it and see. And it was the same thing with the community school as well. You know, the space is there. Let's think about some ideas that maybe haven't been on our radar.
Very good, thank you.
Does anyone else from anything we might have missed?
I'm just curious, and I know it wasn't your assignment. Did you have any conversation about NEW or JDOL in any of your discussion? Oh yeah, JDOL, NEW.
We had JDOL going to Keller to the upstairs.
Yeah.
And then we did talk about NEW going possibly to Lincoln if we made Franklin a K-8.
There it is. Okay, thanks.
Yep. And when we did talk about JDOL with Keller, because of the high school, we were talking about could you configure the school that it would be closed off. Lori brought up that, that wasn't something that people liked. I guess there would have been an idea at West a couple years ago to maybe do something like that. So we would have to take it to them and see, of course.
Okay, thanks.
Very good. Great job. Thank you. Okay. Yes.
In group one, did you, or group two, I'm sorry, can you talk a little bit more about the possibility of buying the Cherry Street location? Did you mention that?
Yeah.
Just for JDL and to keep them in one place? Okay. What would that cost? How viable is that?
It's 2.6 and Ross, now I'm calling you by your last name. Pete can come up and explain it better than I can. Because there's the 2.2 million, but it's only for remodeling.
Okay.
And so, but there's some wiggle room in terms of that, and I'll let you explain what you told me.
Yeah, I apologize. I was actually answering an enrollment question over there. Interestingly enough, the referendum wording was broadly worded enough that you could have funds from the referenda that would go for remodeling spaces in the buildings. So what's residually left in terms of the referendum dollars is about $2.5 million, most of which was earned interest. So that money could be used to remodel or refurbish or renovate existing spaces in the future because we can carry that over. So in a sense, what you could say is you're using the referendum resources to purchase the Cherry Street building because it would be a diversion from Fund 10. Are you following me? Because Fund 10 resources would be needed to renovate those buildings in the future. So you could use Fund 10 money now and use that referendum money to renovate those items in the future. You can't purchase a building with the referendum resources.
You could also use that money to renovate something we also currently own.
Absolutely.
I just want to go on record to make sure that it's
Absolutely.
purchase.
And did we spend referendum dollars to renovate Cherry Street for JDOL this last go around?
I will find the answer to that. I'm not positive.
Some, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'd be interested in the numbers of that.
Sure.
So I'd still like to, well, okay, so that answers that question. Is that Cherry Street property suitable for long-term housing for that program? I mean, it works now, and we've a lot of money's been spent already. But can we envision that them just staying there because they want their own place? Is the size right? Is the parking enough? Is okay, good. So I mean, I know, Christina, you were saying that you'd rather not buy a new building. I get that. That is a huge deal. But I'm wondering if we can. I mean, I just find there's a certain simplicity to just keeping them there.
Well, and to that point, Laura, in our discussion, it was determined that the property would be adequate for JDOL's growth. It would not be adequate for NEW. So if one or the other was to stay there, JDOL would be the logical.
And we actually went through quite a bit of mostly Renee helping us pull all these numbers up. But when we were talking about that, we basically have a long-term goal of JDOL getting to 240 students project-based and 120 online. So that's 260 students, and the online students aren't there full-time. And then the NEW is looking to get to 400 as their top number. So when we saw these numbers, then we were pretty confident that the Cherry Street location would be their final, that it would accommodate them into the future.
But if we were to purchase that building, how do we talk to the public about that? I mean, it wouldn't have to be part of a referendum if the money is there to purchase it. So it's just a matter of saying we're committed to this program. It shows all kinds of potential for growth. The building is already in place. If we can just use the money that's already there to purchase it and is earmarked for that program. Okay, I just kind of needed to think that through because that program has been kind of waiting for a building, like a committed space.
I respond. Thanks, Laura. I think that's a really important point. I love the location there too. I can't imagine how the community would respond when we buy a new building, knowing that we are likely going to have to be repurposing other spaces. That is not a road I'm really willing to go down. And I hear what you're saying. That seems, I can't imagine how that's possible. Yeah, so.
But that money can't be spent for any other program. You know what I mean? Like it's already dedicated for that specific program.
Oh, I'm sorry, I cut you off, sorry.
So that I think that's what we would say, that this money is there to be used for this program. And
I did it again.
The best use is to give that program a permanent home so that it can have some lift and achieve these goals that have been talked about and all the people that have worked over the years in that program. I'm not saying it would be easy. I know it would be hard, but that's would be my hope if we go down that road.
Yeah, no, I hear you. That money can also go into refinishing and our existing buildings. It doesn't have to go to purchasing a new one. So we own spaces already that need updates. They need new windows. They need updated technology and infrastructure. I'd rather see us, personally, at least where I sit now, see us maintain what we have and grow that rather than trying to do something in addition to what we're doing.
And I agree with that, and I would even go even further. When I hear discussions about potential, or not just potential, but projections of enrollment going down significantly, I'm wondering, we said we're planning for the future, but I get confused when we say we don't have the projections of the students, but we're planning for the future. And if we're willing to go in, it's referendum dollars, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I could be wrong, I'm exhausted right now. If we're looking at taking money, it's referendum, but we would still have to take did you not just say something about taking some cash and then replacing it with, I mean, it's not really a wash. You're still taking from a pool of money that could be going to support our existing buildings right now. Or not.
Well, I suppose, I mean, I think we did, for what it's worth, we did say in we did earmark a certain amount of money for JDEL in the referendum. So if we were to say, oh, hey, we did this instead and spent far, far, far less than that on JDEL and used the money in other places, I would think that could bring in multiple perspectives, one of which would be, hey, great job, you saved money and were able to redistribute it. And some of it, another perspective could be, hey, thanks a lot, you promised to invest in this and instead you gave us a cheap second choice to save money and spend the money elsewhere. We'll keep that in mind next time you say X is going to Y. I mean, so both would be heard, I would think.
And I think it's important to remember that wherever JDOL goes, if it doesn't stay at Cherry Street, there's going to be some fairly significant renovations that are going to need to happen because that school doesn't fit into traditional school spaces. So whether we renovate a building we have or we purchase a building that is ready to go with almost no renovations required, there's the cost of the renovation to make a building we have already may not, it may be a wash. The cost may be the same, but buying the building or renovating a new, a Keller or wherever we.
Did you have discussion regarding the benefits of the location? Because it's, the downtown location seems like a huge benefit as opposed to kind of out on the edge of our district, putting it there. So I don't know. I mean, the transportation aspect, things like that. I don't know about that, so.
One of the things that I just want to remind folks, it was a while ago, before the referendum, so some of you probably don't even have that recollection, we talked about, and actually some students went over to West and actually did an architectural mapping with architects, with our PRA when they were doing the facilities. So some of that work, Mike has that data on in terms of what it would cost. To your point, Brenda, it was significant. But they actually, some of the students, former John Dewey students who have certainly gone on to graduate, they were actually part of that discussion at the time as to what it would look like if you repurposed some of the space and had your own entrance, your own school within the school kind of thing. So that's been done, so we have that data. I don't know what that cost is, and Mike's not here, but we can certainly bring that back. I know that I would offer this. What I've seen, and this is something important to think about as well with the conversation with the public, I would think, is to get the recognition that since they've moved into their own space, it's become a much more attractive program for families. For whatever reason, rather than the rental space, it's whatever, and maybe it's a lot of things, but that certainly appears to be, there's a correlation. Just put that out there.
But I would also say, and I've heard this as well, and I think it myself, we are spending a pretty decent amount of time discussing how to support our public charter schools on a regular basis. I mean, and I'm not saying anything against them, I'm just saying the energy seems to be there. So people go to where the energy is, right? They go to the support, they go to the energy. So if we're continuing to talk about how to support these public charter schools in our district, and we're not taking that same energy with our existing buildings, that's why they're going there. But I just want to make sure that that's actually out there because I think that's a thing.
And I think to that point, Rhonda, from an optics standpoint, if the charter school gets a brand new building, right, and we have other buildings that are under enrolled, that's a difficult situation. And to your point, Michelle, we did talk about that exactly. JDOL needing a home, and they need to grow and have that space.
Did you talk about the challenge of, because we've tried things like this before, putting high school kids in the same building with elementary kids and how to sell that?
Yeah, we did talk about that. I think Eric and I mentioned that. We recognize that that's something we'd have to ask the community about. We thought about like how you could structure the building so that there wasn't mixed use entrances and space. I think they shared through some of the work at West that maybe even within that, parents may still not be happy about that. So I think we'd have to go to the Keller community to see how they would feel about it, because it's going to impact them, and they need to be at the table leading that conversation.
I think what's also important to remember is when we bring things forward, sometimes what's lost, because if people can't sit through watching hours of this, and it's not maybe necessarily reported in real time, is that this is what's on the table, but this is what could have been on the table. I think it's important to make sure that whatever is out there, that we're able to give people the idea that this is where we arrived, but this is also what it could be. That we need to make some sort of decision because of X, Y, and Z, and we're here, but this is actually what else, because it's sometimes this is what you're looking at, but this is what you could be looking at. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how we do that. I don't know what that answer is, but I felt like, especially last time, that came up a lot, and I think it's kind of a natural thing to go to. Right. More nuance.
Jump in.
I guess with regards to JDL, and if we bought the building that we're currently paying $350,000 a year to rent, that to me is different than buying a new building out of the blue for JDL would certainly, that doesn't make any sense. But I think you could almost make the argument that and this isn't even intended to be solved today as part of the community conversation, but I think you could make as one of the people who insisted most strongly for funding to be spelled right out in the referendum, this is money for JDL to have its own place. I think that might be a slightly different conversation than, for example, had we not done that and we're only talking about the next referendum having its own space. It's a new conversation. But I think the conversation happened and the money passed. So, I think it's a different thing than looking for new money for it, because I think we would get other pushback that, hey, you said this was for JDL, and we believed you, and then you didn't. And I wouldn't want to, just for the sake of it not being a building purchase, to do something like, rent out the whole thing and keep it JDL, because that's just, giving money to a landlord. So there's, however, I think I'm not, it was the only option that we found on our list that we thought would work, but there needs to be part of community forums and conversations. It was a big deal for them to have their own space, and what I remember as an individual board member about putting in West was a lot of anger that we were even thinking about it, that we would have no identity. Now, would a complete second floor be a different deal? Maybe, but I think they're in a good spot now that money's been put into and money exists from previous. Yeah.
Sorry, Andrew, I just want to ask a question. So are you saying because it was previous referendum money that it would justify buying the building? Is that kind of where you're going with that? I don't know if I misunderstood you.
Well, we said we were going to spend the money on JDL, and I guess I didn't realize if there were a couple words that were missing from my intent was to, my intent was that it was likely that it would be to purchase space, and I think we told that to the community. So I don't know if there was a technicality of a word or two missing in the question, the message to the community was 2.25 for JDL.
And I think in the process of that referendum conversations, we also looked, or maybe it occurred before we decided on the referendum, we also looked pretty hard at Franklin as a space for JDL. Ran into the same kind of resistance of, well, the Franklin, I mean, it's both. The school itself is concerned about having high school kids in their middle school, and JDL was concerned about not having a separate identity because they're part of a big comprehensive middle school.
I think that those are all really valid and important points. If JDL and the surrounding community is not in support or hasn't been in the past of combining a school, I think that's important. Yeah. I don't want to, we shouldn't force anybody to be together if they don't want to. I'll go back to what I said earlier. I would like to first consider the schools that we already own, investing in them with the money because we can do that. Investing in the schools we already own, if that means Lincoln or other, I'm just throwing out options. I'd rather do that first before we start to talk about purchasing new buildings. We have buildings that we already own. I'd like to use them.
Well, and I think we'd have to know, for instance, if JDL goes into Keller, what's the money we would have to invest in the school to remodel that? If NEW went into Lincoln, what's the cost of that? I think we have to have that information of estimates of remodeling, because at the end of the day, it might be cheaper to buy the building they're in and use the space we have for something else that doesn't need a big remodel. That's another option. So I think we just need all of that information laid out so that we're not guessing.
Great. Yes, go ahead.
So if I'm understanding this, and I just want to make sure that we have the direction from the board. And what I'm hearing is that we need to explore and identify some spaces where John Dewey could also go into existing space. Now, that's not part of today's conversation, so I would assume we need to bring that back to you and say, here's what we found. I mean, we've looked before, but we can bring that forward.
Although we have their suggestion, I mean, we have two suggestions. And
for JDL?
They have JDL in Keller, the top floor of Keller.
Okay.
And then they have NEW at Lincoln with the combination of the Franklin K-8.
But they just have JDL in one spot.
Yes,
Okay.
and we just had one spot for JDL.
Right.
So
Do you want us to bring the previous information to you as well?
the West and Franklin?
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, you already have it, right?
we already have it.
Yeah. that'd be
I'm just
good.
thinking so you can see the whole picture, because when we take it out to the community
Right.
conversation, do we take them all out? I just want to make sure we're getting what you need.
I think you're right, Michelle. I think we need to gather as much as we can, and when we present it to the public, it needs to be like Trustee Sitnikow said, share the whole story. This is the whole scope. We want it all out there. This is what's on the table, and let's dig into it.
I guess I would say that with the caveat that I would need, specifically thinking of the West and the conversations I had about JDL going into West, I certainly am opening to listening if the community has a different perspective on it. People do change, but I would need a massive amount of overwhelming new input before it's barely above the threshold of me trying to argue to get it not even considered because there was so much anger. But as long as it's crystal clear that we're not spending new staff time to develop this, it already exists, so we're just going to look at it again. But I would not invest 1 hour of new staff time into.
Yeah.
I mean, if it takes more than 1 hour to find it and collate and everything, but not more than 5 hours of staff time into this idea.
And then, were you going to say something, Katie?
Just as you're exploring this, if you look at capacity, is Lincoln even big enough for NEW?
We talked about that, Katie.
Okay.
Great question.
And what did you decide, Christina?
Actually, when you look, turned me off. When you look at Lincoln's numbers, this is reflective because it's an AGR school. So the 253, the capacity. So it's actually, the capacity is actually greater if you looked at it being more of a traditional school. And Lori, did we have a number with that? Did we know what that capacity was if it's not AGR?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. We had square footage. Yeah, as an indicator of that. So we'd have to look more at the numbers specifically, but we did talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Although, and I'm gonna look at Renee, although NEW, their instructional model has a much as small a class size as AGR schools in general. Is that right? So what?
Right.
So
So
you
it may not
essentially
be- it
need
may
the
not be-
space of an AGR
Okay.
school if you've got
Oh,
small,
okay.
yeah.
Plus you have bigger bodies too.
And you
Yeah,
have
that's
bigger
right,
bodies,
yeah.
so they don't all. Okay.
Well, maybe it
One-
won't work.
Go ahead.
One of the things that may not have been considered that would have been showing up in the square footage or use is the fact that our OTs and PTs are housed there, and they have a significant amount of space there and special programming. So if that would have to be something considered, but there's probably more space than what would show up on the numbers, but we would look into that.
Yeah.
And then we would have to find appropriate homes as part of that movement, so. that's all.
One thing I'm wondering before we go is, we generated 4 ideas for NEW. I'm not sure that even within our group, we were all uniform in saying that's a great idea. So I'm wondering, to avoid having people do work and we can look at that and 5 of us say, not that idea. What do you think of that?
I was just gonna say, great ideas on both ends. The next step really is to say, what do we not wanna further explore
Okay.
on both sides? Because it's gonna cost a lot of time and effort if you wanna look at all 20 of them. I would say, what is your top 3 on each side? If it's not top 3, which ones do you say, we don't wanna further explore?
Maybe start with new, just new by itself, since that's so much of what we do.
Go ahead.
Broken record here. Serious concerns about that program anywhere where they don't have access to the things that they believe they have value in today. So that's just my input on that. Mm-hmm.
So then that would go back to the school community, and they'd have to have input as to the pros and cons of that location versus something else.
Two would fit DO. 2 fits, if you did Lincoln and DOB fit what you're referring to, the community downtown, or access, right? They would be 2 options that would fit that concern. Address that.
Sorry. I would say comparatively to where Keller's location is, it's, much better. Much more access proximity.
Okay, I'm gonna start from if we could just do this, please. If you look at building, Brenda, can you read that I can't read it from here, building, the very last new?
Technical college campus.
We're good with that? Is that something you guys wanna explore?
Can you say that so it's got on the mic? Building on the technical college campus, having the location of NEW on the technical college campus.
Do you guys wanna explore that further?
No.
Okay,
Okay, but what if there's could be something we don't know. There could be something about, if there probably isn't, but if there was some substantial assistance available from the technical college system, I wouldn't want to automatically exclude. I think it's unlikely, but I guess my hope for this was maybe this might be a little bit of a different direction. I guess I would rather see minimum necessary staff time, and whatever you thought of when I said minimum necessary staff time, chop it in half again for an initial round of community input to see if I don't know if I want to take anything off without, based on my assumption that the community would not like it.
Okay, so the question you brought up is, and I think the other board members are saying they don't think it's a good idea because we don't know the details. You're saying we should get community input to see if they like that idea for us to explore further, in addition to talking with NWTC to see if this is even feasible.
And importantly, if there is other, it is a completely different deal if there is hypothetically some of their resources going into it because it's seen as a win-win, or
Okay, I'd like for the other board members to comment on that. What are you guys thinking here? Go ahead.
I would say the only piece of information I want the one piece of information I would want to know before I would go down that path is would we get significant support to build the building, or are we on our own? And because if we're building a building, it's
It goes
way
to
more,
Christina's point.
way more than remodeling or
The 2.6.
yeah. So that's
Yep.
to me a pretty easy exploration.
Yep.
And then and then bring that to the board, and then we decide how much further we want to take that. That's where I stand.
I'll add, if NWTC wants to pay for the building entirely, great. That would be lovely. If they don't, unless they're willing to, then no for me. But love it if they would invest in our public schools.
And part of the driving force is that, in talking with Renee, that eventually the hope is that the senior year will be spent on TC's campus from NEW. A lot of the kids will be there. So that's why we were thinking in terms of proximity.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna say that's probably half of a half of a half of a half time just to find that out, right? And who is gonna be responsible for doing that?
Michelle.
Great. Can we just put Michelle up there as the responsible party? And Michelle, when do you think you can get that done by?
Soon, next couple days.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. What about the one right above it? We good? Further explore?
It's the empty building, existing building, empty retail.
I don't think it would be harmful. I don't think it would be harmful if Mike were to get a handle on what's out there just for future reference. I really don't, because some of these big box stores like Sears have been empty, and if we could get a great price on it, just to see what those options might be. But again, that doesn't take that much time.
Existing open building to purchase.
Go ahead, Eric.
So right now in my day job, we're looking for space to put our administrative staff. And what I can tell you is that, so I've been on this venture of looking.
What are you willing to pay?
I'll pass on that question. But what I will tell you is that the process of looking at available space and touring and seeing your options and thinking like it's not as easy as I thought it would be, because I'm doing that work right now. And so to send someone on our staff on this wild goose chase sounds demeaning, but on just this look around and run and look at different spaces, I don't. It's a lot of work is all I'm going to say. It's not a half of a half of a half of a time to go around and look at all the vacant space in our community and see what works and what might not work and weigh the pros and the cons. So I personally would just I'm not saying that that's a bad idea forever, but for the sake of where we want our staff to invest their time and what they want to explore first, I'd say no to that idea.
Are we good?
Well, I mean, maybe you know the answer to this already if you've looked for another organization. I guess my only hesitation to throw that out would be, is there anything available below market value? Because they just want to be, a big box store. It's been a year. They're not feeling good about selling it, and it's available for pennies on the dollar. But if that is truly non-existent, then I could let it go.
Yeah, so I'm not looking for big box stores. I'm in a different market. But what I would say is that there, in the market that I'm looking for, the amount of square footage, there's not a single person who's willing to give it for pennies on a dollar that I've been able to find. And I've talked to lots of different people in trying to find our solution.
Does anyone here? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Does anyone here know any more about that, or could it be found out relatively? I mean, right? Because you're looking for admin space. There's 100 places. If you're looking at just the feasibility of whether, I don't know the real estate well enough to know that, but I know that occasionally, if you're saddled with a building that nothing is going to go into, it becomes a bit of a liability, and it might become. I just don't want to throw out an idea if it could include us getting something well below market value. Otherwise, I would be no. I mean, it might take 100 phone calls to ferret out but it would probably take 4 to get an answer about big box stores. Maybe they're.
Go ahead, Christina.
I'm sorry, again, why are we talking about additional space when we have space? We have space, right? I mean, in our buildings, we have open space. So I'm just going to push back on you on this. Let's look at what we currently own. Let's invest in what we currently own. Let's reimagine what we currently own. I am not interested in reimagining a big box store. So, I get what you're saying. If we were busting at the seams, like, great, let's do it. But I can't imagine how I'm going to turn around to the community and say, I'm going to do that when Keller's at 40%.
And I
Also, and on top of that, we would like some more referendum dollars.
And also, I would say that you buy a big box store and it is just that, a box with very few windows, and to make it into a healthy school building would be a huge amount of money.
Okay, that's fair. I can drop it. I was thinking of, wow, what if we could get a building for $1? It would still be a few $1 million.
Yep.
Okay.
What's the one above it?
NEW to DOB, explore moving departments to open spaces at Franklin or West was the side. NEW to Keller.
This is a hard sell for me. Why? I think going back to what Eric said, the central location to where the students live, I get NWTC stuff, I get but it's where kids live, and it's the community in which they spend most of their time, and they do not spend most of their time, nor do they live at NWTC. And so, if the board is interested in exploring it, it's just gonna take a lot for me to be able to conceptually get there.
If we have the opportunity to give our students at NEW the opportunity to go to a neighborhood school, I want to try to do that.
Is there anybody who's
Neighborhood school, so redefine what you mean.
What?
Keller is a neighborhood school, so what do you mean?
Not to the neighborhood where our kids live.
Where our kids are, thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, what from my personal experience, the kids who go to that school, I would argue that a majority of them live in that neighborhood. Maybe that's unfounded, that's my perception, but that's.
So is anybody willing to fight for this? Or are we crossing it off?
I would like to at least have the NEW School of Innovation give us their assessment of what their feelings are about going to Keller.
That's fair.
Versus DOB versus. They should. So
that's a good point.
I don't want to cross it off until I hear from them.
I'm okay with that. Give them all the options.
And that's all of Keller, because
Yeah, it'd be all of Keller, yeah.
Janelle, can you put down that community conversations specifically to Keller and New, right?
It would be I would like to start with the NEW school itself, staff, the students, the parents, and have them give us their opinion, and then we can
Perfect.
winnow the choices down.
Perfect.
And you want to give them options with that, Brenda, right? Like, so it's this, Keller is just one of those options.
Yeah, Keller, DOB, and then you guys have Lincoln.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
When we do that, we'll ask them to specifically what they need within the school. Like it will be not just what they're like, what they would like, but what they see conceptually it would take for a space.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I'm sure we already have that, but
And
that's
whether
important.
there's, yeah, she's gone.
Yeah.
Can you come to microphone, Vicki, please? Thanks.
I would like the board to be very specific about what questions you're looking for, so we don't have to keep going back and forth. So if that could be captured somewhere, that would be wonderful.
Okay.
I mean, Vicki, all I'm thinking is just, their learning style, what sort of learning environment and space they're looking for that would best meet the needs of the students and the teachers. So if there's anything specific that they need, right, that would be good to be captured now.
Eric?
The one thing that I might add there, and you'd have to check with the staff who've helped to develop NEWs, they might have already done that.
Right.
Like that feedback might, maybe the school has started to be developed with that feedback in mind, so maybe we don't need to do that over again. I'm imagining that all the process of making that school come to life, that at some point they talk to kids and staff. So if that's been done already, don't feel like you need to get more information that you already have.
Although I would like them to give me specific information about the 3 options, right? We just have 3 on the table.
DOB, Keller, and Lincoln.
DOB,
Well-
Keller.
Also still want to include the building at the new technical college.
No,
No.
because,
No.
and that.
So
we
after
can
the
build.
phone call.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that
That
will
might be
build
a-
their specifications if we go that route.
So it's Keller, DOB, and Lincoln?
And
Yes.
Lincoln.
Yep.
I'd like them to do a walkthrough and say, this is ideal, this would have to be remodeled, this is, this location is good, bad, just a sense from them about the pros and cons of those 3 sites.
The one thing that I would just want to make sure that, getting a lot of parent input in this process is going to be difficult. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't try, but if we offer it and 2 people show up, it's not because our administration didn't do a good job, but I know that it's a difficult to engage in this kind of a conversation. So certainly think of outside the box on ways that we can do that.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking too, like, as this gets out into the community, and I don't want Lincoln people to freak out and, Keller. So how are we getting out in front of that to the schools so they understand that these are concepts? And I think we have to do a better job of going to where people already gather, going into those spaces rather than holding something separate and saying, come to us. We need to be going to them. So if that's a PTO meeting, if that's a community meeting, if that's an event, like, let's look at that schedule and make that happen. Because I think that's exactly right. We saw what happened with Jefferson.
If I could, just because I'm speaking on behalf of the executive directors and principals as well, I think that there is some concern that things get out really quickly before we have a chance to have the communication carefully planned. It could, potentially be out yet today.
It is.
Exactly.
Already.
So things are out, and we've already talked with the Lincoln staff to let them know that there may be some conversations about some things that we didn't know where things would land, but that we would inform them as soon as possible. So I guess if there's any particular guidance from the board as far as how much you would like communicated, if we can have that defined by the end, that would be helpful, as well as if we want to think about what methods for those initial meetings or conversations, because I think that it would be helpful for us as a whole.
Thanks, John. Just to clarify, so when the staff or the team from NEW is looking, they're looking for space for the program, place, location, where it is located in terms of access and development of resource, space, place, and what else? You want to know cost, if we can, in terms of renovation, what they think would be needed for renovation. Because you can have the space and it can be in the right place, but it could cost 3 times as much as where they're currently, or whatever. Okay. Does that help, Vicki?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, J-Doll.
J-Doll staying at Cherry Street. That's one of only 2 options. So I think we all agreed earlier that was what needed to be explored, correct?
Yes or no?
Yes.
So then on the other board, school within a school for Keller,
Yes.
My favorite idea.
Franklin K-8 with the side tag of Lincoln being moved to new, which we already have over there, so that's a given, but J-Doll to Keller, that's option number 2 for J-Doll. Whereas J-Doll at Cherry Street is option number 1. Keller to Kennedy. Yes?
I mean, yes, but yes as an option, but not, it doesn't fit as is. I mean, there would have to be, Keller to Kennedy with some kind of addition or modification, yes, but looking at this and saying, ooh, maybe it's close enough, would be a hard no for me, because there's reasons that the capacity of Kennedy is not really the 415 on here because of special programming.
So, yeah, Keller to Kennedy with the caveat that it would there should be a referendum in order to make that happen.
And we had it as a K-8 as an option also.
Right.
Keller to Kennedy, make it a K-8.
Could it also be Keller to other local feeder elementaries? Doesn't have to just be Keller to Kennedy too, right? I mean, Chapel has space, right? And also, there were other surrounding.
I think that we talked about Keller to Kennedy because of the fact that we can add on to the school because they've got a big land footprint, and that we could move the entire school together.
Right. But let me ask you a follow-up. Why would I understand wanting to move an entire school, but again, we have Chapel that has space. We have other surrounding elementary schools that have space. So why?
If you keep all the Keller kids together and send them to Kennedy, then they're all on the same track for Lombardi and Southwest.
Yeah, I understand. I just think that it's important that, that's a very transient school, Keller is, and I just think if we're going to talk about that, but I also think looking at other schools too to see if there are other feeder patterns would, for me, be interesting.
Yeah, I think that sounds like it might be a detail down the road.
Yeah.
If we start going to like, yep, this is going to happen, now we start getting into details, that would, giving kids options, and is there another way? Yeah.
To me, that's the school community feedback.
Yeah, school community feedback.
But is it fair to say that one might require a referendum versus the other one doesn't?
Correct.
So that's a big difference as well.
You're saying the feeder schools is no referendum,
Right.
whereas the other one is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Because I can imagine people would be like, well, did you think about, if you're saying you have no space, or you have less space here and here, are you looking into all of that before you go ahead and ask us for more dollars?
I hope not lost in here as we're looking. I get that we need to have a reasonable starting list to bring to the community, but it's perfectly okay with me if the best idea is in the mind of nobody in this room and nobody in this building and nobody I've even met before. So, maybe it makes the most sense to have a JDL go into something that crossed none of our minds yet. I don't know. So, this is important because we're coming off of a situation where I think we all received comments that, I shouldn't speak for everyone, but I think everyone got at least some, that, you held a community forum, but the decision was done. And so the more open we are to, I would certainly be open to, new input coming in from a community conversation that is none of these.
The only thing that I would add to that, Andrew, is that I also got some ideas that weren't very good, that didn't solve our problems. And so when those ideas got presented to me, and I said, well, that doesn't fix this, or that doesn't, people are going to present some things that aren't good ideas, and if that's viewed then as, well, you're not listening to the feedback. We've gone through a lot last night and today, and certainly in the past, on things that we have to consider. And people might bring suggestions that in their minds are great, and why didn't you consider that? Well, we didn't consider it because it doesn't address the how and the why and the who and the what.
I'm okay with saying that. I'm okay with saying that to someone. And also, there are ideas that don't work but generate a partial solution, perhaps to a new thing. Sure. Like,
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm glad we're talking about this, because I was sitting here thinking too. Yeah, someone told me recently that they have been told not to talk to school board members, and I think that it's really important that when we leave this room today, that we encourage people to be a part of the dialogue in whatever way they feel like they can be. And if that means reaching out directly to us, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea, that we all should be encouraging that feedback, because, you know, that's important. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and I hope we all can commit to that, that if we have said, and I'm not saying anybody in here said it, but this person told me it, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's really terrible. So I hope we can leave with sort of that intention.
One of the things that I think has been helpful in experience would be that we have a place and space where people can, all these ideas can be put in so that the board can see all the ideas as well. In other words, instead of just single people being approached, I would guess that at any of our convenings, we will ask people for cards and feedback too that can all be archived so that the board can see everything. And to all of your points, there may be a kernel of something that pops into another space that no one had been thinking about. So I agree with you. The question is, I just want to make sure there's a place and space where people who may not be contacting you or comfortable or contacting me or what have you, have that place before we leave today, so that we are able to get that out there and say, here's where we're at, here's what we're talking about, weigh in. So that, does that make sense?
Michelle, could we do something where we put and maybe this is a really stupid idea, like put a survey up, just of something very quick that people can enter comments, or it doesn't have to be long, but just something, whereas like this gets out into the community, people have a direct place that they can go and provide anything.
That's what we did. Where's Lori? She's behind that's what we did last time, Lori, didn't we? On our website, it was the ability to just write in comments.
Not a survey, but just something that, like, space. We're all directing everybody into this one place. Right. Go here and.
Yeah.
Right.
Can I just make a recommendation, Lori, before you speak? So when you guys are doing your community conversations, it's going to be really important for you to put together an FAQ, right? Because that FAQ can be visible right on the website. That way you know some of the ideas that are being generated just from your discussions and the community conversations that you're doing, in addition to the suggestion box.
Can I ask that it also be shareable to our social media? Mm-hmm.
So can I just raise a concern I have as so my wonderment on this is that I'm hearing about us engaging the community on these things, but I'm wondering, before you want that step, do we want to go through the effort though of first finding out if these are viable options first? So we might not get to community input for a while yet, as we have to work through what are viable options here, because I think you need to rule out things once you have the data to say, yeah, we would never even take that to the community because that doesn't make sense once we see all the data, right? I just want to make sure that what I'm hearing is we're going to the community, and I just want to make sure, like, I'm worried that we're missing that step, and I don't want us to go out with things that weren't viable. So
I think your point exactly. We have to first be able to have a document that walks everyone through the basics. These are the FAQs, and we have to drill down to that place, and then. But that has to happen sooner rather than later, because to John's point, this already information is out there, and the longer we sort of let people spiral, the harder it's going to be to bring them back. So I would encourage us. I mean, I know this is a big body of work, but yes to that, and then that piece.
So I will also add that your messaging has to be consistent. You can't be saying something different than the administration is saying. You just can't do that. That's where confusion comes in, people get riled up, and you got to revolt. You don't want that. Make sure your communication is aligned.
So we tried this last time, and there were some reasons it didn't end up working. But last time I had sent the board members a a blog post that we were gonna post to say what we were, so that, and I was kind of waiting for feedback from folks to say, yep, we agreed that this was what the meeting had entailed, so that we had on our website sort of like the one place of truth, this one source of truth, like, yep, so we could everybody could come back, you would be able to direct people back and say, here's what we talked about, here are the next steps, here's how this is gonna move forward. So that to try to address the rumor issues of people kind of hearing something and they don't know where they can go to get the right information. And I think if we have that in a public place where everybody can see, here's what they'll have this obviously on tape, but I think it's just a nice way to summarize, here's the things that are going to be moved forward for, to get more detail on. And then once the board narrows that down, we'll be then engaging the public in some community conversations.
And that's where you could put the link for feedback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right there.
When do you anticipate that happening?
Well, my plan would be to have something to you tomorrow to look at.
That'd be great.
And that's just a general overview of what we did and our next steps, yeah. And then how long before we're ready, or not me, but people having to do all of the work? How soon can we schedule another meeting for us to go over that?
Brenda, before we go over that, can we just finish those last two things?
we
I
didn't
just want to make
finish them,
sure. I know you want to get out of here.
Yeah, we have about 5 minutes. Keller becomes DOB/professional learning. And then community school is also listed as a potential for Keller. So really on this page, there's 3 things for Keller. I'm trying to quantify this a little bit better. Keller becomes JDOL. Keller becomes DOB professional learning. Keller becomes community school. Or Keller becomes Montessori or school within a school. So that's actually 4 things. Or there could be a combination of things, correct?
I would assume subset of Keller becomes DOB, could be some of DOB relocates to Keller and the rest of it remains a neighborhood school. I mean, I would think that would be I have a hard time picturing at this point how Keller could become the whole DOB, but I could easily see, I mean, depending on where other dominoes fall, having, open seats have to be, if we don't want to be shuttering buildings, which I think no one wants to, open seats need to be filled with kids or services, or we're renting the space out, but I mean, it has to be filled with something, but the something could be something other than students. That would then free other space.
Are we going to be making it, by doing all of this, are we going to basically be sending the message that doing nothing at Keller and just leaving it the way it is an option? Because it's not, the more we talk about this, the more I realize that it's not an option to just keep it the way it is. Yeah. So that in itself is a message. That's like item number 1. Something's going to happen. Okay.
But the something that could, the something, I want to make sure, because otherwise this is where they go back and say, yep, I knew it. You met for 2 days and this was cooked and you're just giving us choices about which thing you kick us out for. I think it is, and I've only had a couple of conversations about this. When people have said, don't close Keller, I'll say, what I need to hear is something different than just run it half full.
Right.
Now, and so that's why I think, does something have to happen with Keller? Yep, because it's half full. But I just want to make sure we don't leave this room with that not being clear that we couldn't fit. And there's another thing besides office, we have a school within a school. But yes, it can't just be half full. Yeah.
Can I just say something really quick? Sorry.
I'm glad you said that, and thank you, because I think the messaging needs to be, we are committed to being invested in the Keller community. We're not just going to pull the rug out from underneath you, right? And so these are the options because we believe in it. And I think to go back to the community school, I'm really interested in that. I know we've talked about expanding the community schools model here. We have a community schools coordinator. I think there's a lot there. I think people are interested in it. I think it could be really exciting. It might be able to pull in students and increase enrollment. So I would like to see that be on the table. That's it.
One of the things we know, and I shared it briefly with you, is that if Lincoln is an option for NEW, we're going to have to move some significant OT, PT, and all of that equipment out there. Could Keller be a consideration for that team and that equipment?
No, for
Keller
Lincoln's OTPT equipment.
and staff. Yeah. So that's what I'm asking, because it says DOB and it doesn't say the shifting, but if you're okay with that, I don't want to explore anything or go down that road if it's not an option.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the things on that paper, not all of them, but a lot of them they're all interact with each other, right? So, and like we said, maybe there's not an idea that we said here, so you just were a perfect example of that. What about OTPT at Lincoln? So, yes.
I just want to go back to what Andrew is talking about in terms of status quo, half full. Want to really, again, have that communication be aligned with all of you. There's an opportunity cost for doing nothing. And what is that? And you have to be really well versed in what that opportunity cost is. And I'm sure our finance guy over there, Pete, right? Pete. Yeah, good. We'll be able to provide those numbers for you, right? And what does that look like? So again, consistent messaging. You have to be aligned on this, guys. Can't be different from what the administration is saying versus what you're saying. You have to come together. Otherwise, none of this is going to work.
I think that everybody here agrees, and I think we need to do a better job than what we've done in the past to make sure that that happens.
Would the guiding document, the whys listed there, be a good way to kind of segue those two things? Do you think putting that out to everybody as a part of like a message from the board as to why this is being looked at be beneficial? And can we put something together?
As Lori was talking before, I thought about what you were going to put online, that this document has, because people are going to be like, well, why? Why do we need to do any of this at all? And this will help, you know.
Do you think that it would be beneficial rather than putting that document, which is kind of big and bulky and intimidating, to synthesize it down to a couple of messages? Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't meeting that document or the stuff that's on that document.
People are going to want to know why. That, you know, like, why do we have to do anything at all with these schools?
I just want to be clear because I'm going to be one of the main conduits of information, and I know last time when we had some changes with Jefferson, there was some, dissatisfaction as far as the order of operations and how things came out with communication. And I know this will come out quickly, and there's a wide variety of options. So there's a wide variety of people that are potentially affected and potentially upset and concerned, and we want to make sure that we're listening to those concerns and we're providing forum as well. Wondering about the possibility of, in just looking at previous referendum work and other work with facilities here and in other districts, sometimes having a third-party neutral party outside, like we have one today, sometimes as the facilitator of those conversations can be productive if there is not always unity of voice. And I know that there is a cost to that, but there's a cost to not doing that too, because if we're trying to communicate or run meetings that are input sessions and they're not run accordingly and that it's not providing the satisfactory results, then I think that can be a challenge. So I want to make sure that we're delivering the product that you need and want your opinion on what you would like that to look like.
When something I think is potentially emotional as this, having a neutral third party just makes practical sense to me. Yes, it's a cost, but if we get if we get good results and people come away from these big shifts and changes feeling like they have been heard and that the process was neutral, then I would say that's a win. I mean, that's a win for everybody, not just for any individual group, but for everybody.
So can I understand then or get clarification of what you're saying? So if someone says, Laura, what's going on at Lincoln? What is your response to that?
Or can I? Or,
No, actually, I'd like,
No, I want to ask because
but I'd like to know like what that sounds like to you as far as, well, actually, Sally, there's a third party entity that's going to answer that question for you. I guess I just want to understand.
No, it's not a third party that's gonna answer it. It's a third party who's gonna help all the parties get there together, because we didn't get there together last time. So the suggestion is that that entity will help us, basically facilitate us to some decision-making so that everyone feels heard and part of the process. That's all.
Thank you for that, because I wasn't understanding that. So, but wouldn't that wouldn't that be you?
Is that the kind of work you do? I do. Yeah. The community session facilitation.
He paid you to do this. You paid him, right?
But can I just finish, because I think what's important is historical context. Otherwise, we're going to rehash for 2 hours and then come back. Just my thoughts on that.
I don't think from my perspective, I don't think the hurt and anger at Jefferson, and there would have been some anyways, but I don't think it was so much about who was facilitating as it was, too short of notice, or things talking about things not saying in clear everyday language what options are being considered, right? There are options up for continued discussion, some of which include all Keller students going to a different school. And it needs to be stated just like that. There are other options that include Keller students remaining in Keller, okay? That wasn't said with Jefferson. And Jefferson's message included, there was at least one, and this was a very small, I'll say probably just one person, but it was it was so confusing that one person's line of thought was, oh, okay, school consolidation. Well, we're really small. I guess we're getting new kids consolidated in. Great. When that was because we didn't say in plain language, so I don't know if we necessarily need a facilitator at the meetings when we have people who can do that. I'm not saying there's never a place for it either, but I guess I like to do what I can in-house before we go out, and I think it would have been just like, okay, so a third-party facilitator doing the Jefferson meetings would have gone just as poorly, because that facilitator would have had no answer to the shortness of notice and the lack of a plain language of what was going to happen. I think that's more important. Yeah.
But I would say that the neutral part of it would be, I think, important, because people have their biases, and some people have a fairly embedded distrust of large organizations, and feel that they don't have their voice isn't as powerful as they'd like it to be in those kind of situations. So that neutrality, I think, would be a big part of that, dispelling that distrust when that person that is doing that facilitating does not have stake in the decision, is just there to get to a decision, not any particular decision.
I would say we're already ahead of where we were last time. I think the conversation is different, the approach is different, the transparency is different, the collaboration for me, it feels very different. It feels like we're approaching this in the way that I wish we would have last time. I just want to mention that before we really start doing a lot of conversation with the community, that I think we should all definitely visit any of the schools that are being mentioned. And we should definitely be able to say that we have, all of us, for sure.
I would, one of the things that I know that Casey and Janelle, the reason we've invited them to begin with is because they've done this work in some pretty contentious environments and been very successful. So I would like to be able to just be able to use their support and consultation. I believe we can facilitate much of it ourselves, but I know that their experience is invaluable in helping shepherd this through in whatever capacity that looks like. But I, to your point, Andrew, we can facilitate a lot of it ourselves, but depending upon how things move, I'd like to have that ability to have Casey and Janelle walk with us through this journey, because we again know they've done this work and done it really well, and it goes back to the transparency and wanting to make sure the community feels that they've been part of the answer. They may not get exactly what they had in mind, but everyone needs to be heard.
And this will be a much more complicated process than just one school. This has multiple layers and will affect, frankly, more people, and includes just a larger geographical area in our city.
Okay, so we're at 2:10. And there's one last thing that I want to do. Understanding we're going to take these two sides over here, transfer the information on those permanent boards, right? I would like to ask the administration here, understanding that there's one item that Michelle is going to handle, which is the NWTC, the very last item there. I'd like to understand the timing on the rest of it. Is it a month? Is it 2 months? Is it 3 months? Who wants to address that for me? Yep.
If you could give us a few minutes in terms of Monday, we would meet and kind of walk it through and reassign it and then send a timetable out. I think the priority right now, because people know we're meeting today, will be getting the blog out and having the board respond. And then by Monday, we can go through it as a team and start to look more carefully at different opportunities and what that looks like. We may not have all the answers because Mike's on vacation, but we'll give it our best. And that way we'll get as much information to you as in that timeline, and then we'll work together if that, I mean, it's a couple days if that works. I just want to make sure that we can convene and really reflect on and before the work is assigned to people. So
Will you potentially have enough information by Monday that we could set another meeting? Or
I would think so. I would
because we
think
could
so.
put that on our agenda for Monday.
Yeah, I
to
would
set
think so.
the next meeting.
Yep, absolutely.
A very quick recommendation. I don't know if you all feel strongly about this, but in that blog post, Lori, I would love to see if you could just embed the link that takes people to the site has all our names and email addresses, so you can make it really easy. Want to talk to the board? Here you go.
We didn't get to the stakeholder discussion, but you guys can lead that discussion. The question is, who are your stakeholders? Want to be very clear on that. Level set, okay? So Janelle and I will take this information, put it on the permanent boards, and then Michelle is going to get back to you by Monday on that timeline. Are we good? Thank you, everybody. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. I'd entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
You have been watching the Green Bay Area Public School District's Board of Education meeting. Please visit the school district's website, www.gbaps.org, to view the program again. If you cannot fully access the information on this video, please let us know the accessibility issue you are having by calling 920-448-2025 or by email at communications@gbaps.org. We will try to provide the information to you in an alternative format and/or make the necessary improvements to make the information accessible.